You did it.
Hello. I did it. Well,
So,
welcome. We are streaming from both our channels now, right?
and for the first time, Natalie is hosting and handling all of the comments.
That's right. So, this is going to be a lot of fun because I have done solo on my own, but there's not nearly as many comments, not yet, anyways, as there is when I do this with Aaron. So, I am hosting. So, welcome to my channel, Scientology Life After a Cult, and welcome back if you've been here before. And I made a new intro. I'm totally geeking out about it. I'm like, Grandma made an intro.
No, I
So
think it's great.
yeah. So what do you think about today's topic? We're going to talk about 10 cringe, except I think we're going to come up with more. And if you think of one, please put it in the comments. These are what I'm calling 10 cringe-worthy moments inside Scientology. And for me, these are pretty much things that as a Scientologist, I thought they were cringe.
Mm. Oh, that's an interesting thing to consider because I think most of these things I did not think was cringe.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, it just got worse after I left, but there were times, there were moments, and these are things, we've they're different. We talk about there's, the abuses, different things that have happened, and these are things that I felt when I was a Scientologist that I was embarrassed about. And they are yeah, I can't wait to dive into it. And if you think of any more, if you have your own, go ahead and put it in the comments, which I'm going to figure out how to manage here. But should we just jump right into it?
Yeah, and I'll try to keep an eye on the comments as well. And I don't have the power to star them or bring them up on the screen, but I'll try to note down some interesting ones that I see.
Okay. And so I have so to star them, oh, I see. Oh, you got to click on them and then you can star them or click on that. All right, cool. All right. Are you ready? The first
Yes.
one. The first one on this list of the 10 cringe-worthy moments inside Scientology. And again, this is from the point of view of these were things I felt cringy about when I was in Scientology. And now that I'm out, it's even worse. And the first one on the list, Battlefield Earth, the movie. Let's just talk about that for a minute.
This is an amazing one. I remember before this thing was actually released,
Uh-huh.
I had become convinced that this was literally one of the greatest movies of all time. This was like Star Wars times 10. And because I thought to myself, this is still back in the day when you think like David Miscavige is like literally, the greatest, the God's greatest gift to humanity other than L. Ron Hubbard. And it would be absolutely impossible for this thing to have, sort of been in the works for like 20 or 30 years, or for them to at least have had like 20 or 30 years to try to get it into the works. And how could John Travolta possibly be involved and this not be great? And Travolta was making, the rounds on all the talk shows and saying that Steven Spielberg said it was great and George Lucas said it was great. And then it came out and it was just, I remember being so confused as to why the camera was always crooked. I was like, I'm wanting to watch the movie like this. I was like, why is the damn camera always crooked? Is that supposed to make this an edgy movie? It's so bad.
I think that was it. Did you read the book?
I genuinely enjoyed the book.
Me too. Me too. The book, Battlefield Earth, I actually enjoyed. I love sci-fi. But the movie made me just want to die, just crawl under a rock. I went with my family who were also Scientologists, and we were so excited to go support this film with John Travolta in it. And we go to the theater, and afterwards, well, into it while it's going, I'm just sinking down in my chair like, oh my gosh, I am so embarrassed and mortified by this. And there were people who walked out too. I remember seeing people walk out of the movie theater. And when it was done, I was just like, oh, I just can't. We would just, and because we were all Scientologists, you can't really slam the movie because I was with my mom and my stepdad, but just the look on their faces, even I think was kind of like, oh, okay. I did not like it.
It was just so bad. It made me question the entire movie making process in Hollywood of how can a turd like this make
Like, what were
it
you thinking?
through? I mean, I guess at some point, a big production like that gets enough momentum that it just can't stop once it starts.
Yeah.
But you wonder if everyone involved like realized how bad this thing they were involved in was.
Yeah.
And yeah, that
Kelly says, didn't they make you watch it at least 3 times? Torture. I didn't. I wasn't a staff member then. Were you, Aaron?
let me Google when this movie actually came out. I
Since
think
they
I
made
think I
you.
was a Philadelphia staff member. And when you hear of people being bussed to the movie theaters, those are the Sea Org members.
Some people are saying, Aaron, you should check your mic, that it's a little low. I feel like I can hear you well, but maybe you can turn it up a little.
I don't know how to turn up my mic, and people always say that, and it's kind of
you know what I think it is? I think because I'm just such a loud talker.
Yeah, I'll bring my mic closer, but when I bring my mic closer, all my T's and P's pop all the time or whatever. Yeah, in my live chats, people are always complaining about audio levels, and when I watch the videos, I never notice any problems whatsoever. I think it's more on the consumer end, but we'll figure it out.
Yeah, exactly. So Battlefield Earth was the first one. Battlefield Earth, the movie, I found that to be super cringe when I was in Scientology. And now that I've left, it's just even worse. But like I said, I actually did enjoy the book. The other thing, number 2 on my list of the most cringe-worthy moments in Scientology, the hip hip hoorays.
For me, this was a big thing because I was the course supervisor and I was the one who at the end of the night had to lead the hip hip hoorays to L. Ron Hubbard at the end of every night of course, which would have been okay if the only people in the course room were actual Scientologists. But because at the time Philadelphia didn't have an introductory course room, all of the brand new people doing their first Scientology course for the first time were in there with all the real Scientologists. And I'd have to go up to them like 15 minutes before course ended and be like, listen, we got like a little kind of, a little ritual we do at the end of the night just to show respect to L. Ron Hubbard. We do like a 3 hip hip hooray kind of deal. Don't worry about it. And I'd be like, okay, that's it for course. How did everyone do tonight? Excellent. Who had any wins they want to share? And people would share their wins, just like Flag. Like we did it just like Flag.
Yeah.
And then be like, all right, everyone, that's it. Let's end the night. 3 cheers to LRH. Hip, hip. Hooray! I mean, it's so bad. It's so bad. And you don't realize quite how bad it is until a normie is present and you're like, oh, shit. Oh, this is not going to go over well.
Yeah. Yeah. It just always, my whole time growing up in Scientology and Scientology as an adult, the whole hip hip hooray thing made me very uncomfortable because it seems so very dated also. Like, who does that anymore? People don't really do that. I don't know if they did before, and this was just a Scientology thing, but lordy.
I've never seen it anywhere. I've never seen it anywhere outside of Scientology. So now I mentioned the hip hip hoorays just at the end of course, but they do this at the major international events with David Miscavige on stage as well. I mean, they did it when Tom Cruise was up there with David Miscavige. I mean, Tom did like the world's most awkward salute to L. Ron Hubbard and then to LRH. And then I remember there's 2 times in my entire life that I brought some non-Scientologists to one of these events. One was my grandparents in LA, and one was a friend of mine named Stacy one time. And it's crazy. Like, for me, I just didn't realize how weird and culty this stuff was until there's a fresh set of eyes there that you're having to like see things through their eyes. And when I brought my grandparents, the audio at the event, because it was a live David Miscavige event, was so loud. They left. They literally got up. They're like, oh my God. And I'm realizing, oh yeah, we do this really, really loud, don't we? But I was a young little Sea Org member with young ears and it didn't bother me. But my grandparents were my grandparents. They got up and walked out in the middle of the event because it was too damn loud.
Wow.
Never mind the hip hip hoorays and the up and the down and the up and the down. And even when you're not hip hip hooray and you're having to stand up and give an ovation like every 4 minutes, every time COB finishes a sentence, practically, you've got to stand up and applaud, and nobody wants to be the first one to stop clapping. Like it's bonkers.
Yeah. Yeah, the hip hip hoorays was definitely something that I found completely cringe and still, and that is something I definitely do not miss that, not at all, because it's so bad. I feel for
Yeah.
you though, having to do it as a course room supervisor, that's almost worse.
Every night. And I had to convince myself. I mean, I had to like own it to make it not awkward, but man, it was awkward.
I love though that you
Uh
went around and told students who were totally new, "Hey, just kinda just ignore this."
yeah, heads up, guys. Warning of what's about to happen. Brace yourselves because this is happening.
Okay, number 3 on my list of the most cringe-worthy moments inside Scientology, which I also thought as I was a when I was a Scientologist, and it was signing in and out of the course room complete with a time date stamp. And I'm like, was this just something that was done at certain organizations? But I think it was everywhere.
It's in
We
the policy letter. What is a course, if I recall correctly? Because if it wasn't in the policy letter, it wouldn't have been at flag. And
Yeah.
yeah, and yeah, sign in, sign out, just like you're in the third grade. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah, and
and
when
it's
you
not
gotta
like
go to
anyone
the
ever did
bathroom.
anything. It's not like anyone ever did anything with the sign out sheet. Like in retrospect, it really served no actual purpose. Like, did you have so many students that you couldn't keep track of where they were? Like, come on.
Exactly, 100%. And, you know, what was going through my head at the time was I was more like I didn't wanna put how long I was gone because that felt very intrusive and, like, what if it, like, looked like I was spending a ton of time in there? Which in my head it gave me a bit of anxiety about the whole thing. It was so stupid where it's, why can't you just go to the bathroom? But no, you need to sign out, note the time, and then the time that you come back. It was just absolutely ridiculous.
They're like, oh my goodness, looks like Natalie needs some fiber in her diet.
Yeah.
My God.
She was gone so long, but that would explain the toilet paper on the back of her shoe as she walks back in. True story. All right, so another one on my list of cringeworthy moments inside Scientology, calling female seniors sir. I never liked it.
Mm. Yeah, it's really weird.
Mhm.
And I remember kind of not being sure if that's what they did in the real military.
And I don't think I've
And
never seen that or heard of that.
no, I mean, of course they call women ma'am in the military.
Yeah.
And yet it's funny because I got into such a state of mind that to me it seemed almost condescending to call a woman ma'am because you weren't giving her the same title of respect that you would to a man. And so to
Yeah.
me, I got to a point where it made perfect sense.
Mhm.
And I mean, in the Sea Org, I was calling my wife sir. Like my wife was senior to me in the Sea Org.
Oh.
And her job was such that sometimes she was in my area and I called her sir. I didn't, it wasn't weird to me by that point.
Yeah.
And also, other than the fact that L. Ron Hubbard said that was the rule, that's what you were supposed to do, he didn't give some explanation for why. Like, there's no like fundamental Scientology belief that would say why you have to call a woman sir. I mean,
Yeah.
someone could come up with one, but they'd just be inventing something. Like L. Ron Hubbard didn't even bother to explain why he was making this the rule. And
No.
it's funny because so many of his rules come from the Navy, and yet this is one he decided to change without even explaining why.
Oh, this
The
is
British Army
interesting. Yeah, do you
The
see that?
British Army calls female officers sir.
Oh.
Really?
Never heard of that.
Wow. I gotta Google that. Wow.
Human says, "My
Do
Uber Eats delivery guy called me sir the other day. It was humbling."
do British military
Yeah.
call women sir?
I've I've
Okay,
not
well,
I've not I've not heard that. Yeah, I've not heard that.
okay, well, that Google search did not quickly give me a confirmation of that. But look, I'm gonna take your word for it. I don't think you're making it up. That's
Yeah.
incredible. Oh, wait. It says here from Route Irish. I can't pull it up because it's yours, but we never called female officers sir in the Army, always ma'am. But I don't know
Mhm.
if that's person's from Ireland and Ireland's not Britain anyway, right?
Yeah,
No
I've not heard of
female
that.
officers are called ma'am. I think a lot of these comments are referring to the American military. Corey McKenzie
Yeah.
is saying, not true. All right, well, I guess we're forwarding false data. We need to do false data stripping now.
Yep.
What did L. Ron Hubbard say about this?
Wasn't part of that, how could it be true? How could it not be true? Right?
Yeah, that was part of the study tech.
I have not thought about false data stripping in such a long time. And if you're not familiar with it, people, it's pretty much this was Scientology's way of showing you if you had a disagreement, you read something and you're like, no, I don't really believe that. That just doesn't resonate with me.
That's right.
They're going to make you look up your misunderstood words, of course, because if you don't agree with L. Ron Hubbard, you obviously don't understand what he's saying. But then the false data stripping would come in where even more so, it was this crazy kind. And I remember at the time doing it and even feeling weird about it. Like, well, wait a minute, because we're told if it, what's true for you is true for you in Scientology. Yet in reality, that is absolutely not the case. And false data stripping was all about stripping away what you thought and what you held to be true and having it replaced by something that L. Ron Hubbard said.
We should do a video sometime just on false data stripping and showing people the procedure. And there's the detection steps of how do you detect if you have false data? And the last step is basically, do you have some idea that conflicts with something that L. Ron Hubbard said?
Yeah, that's a great idea. We should totally do that because it is, talk about cringe. This stuff's kind of funny and still cringy that we're talking about, but that is next level cringe.
Yeah, that's kind of like, that's like a little Scientology brainwashing tool that you really don't hear a lot about.
Yeah, absolutely. I will add it to the list.
Nice.
Now, the other thing that I found super cringe when I was in Scientology, and as a former course room supervisor, I'm very interested to see in what you thought about this. It was when people who were listening to L. Ron Hubbard's lectures or even just reading something and they laugh out loud, but like really loud, not just little, full blown, like loud. I hated that. And I don't even know why I hated it. I thought in my head, and really I remember thinking this when I was a teenager doing a training program in Los Angeles, where I really started seeing this more. And it felt like, to me, it seemed like a little attention getting. Like I get L. Ron Hubbard so well that I think it's funny what I'm reading. That sounds so bitchy on my part, but it's totally what I thought.
It's Scientology style virtue signaling that you get it like, oh, this L. Ron, does he nail that one on the head? My God. There's not a single thing I've ever heard L. Ron Hubbard say or write that would warrant a laugh out loud reaction. Oh, that really indicates. It's either something that someone does to keep the course supervisor away, or some course supervisors might be like, go see what the hell is going on with that guy. Go find his misunderstood word.
Yeah. You're really right about the virtue signaling. That was like, oh my gosh, I wouldn't have thought about it like that, but you're so right. That's why I love sharing these things, being able to talk about what happened back then, because you're not able to talk about it when you're going through it. Because if you have feelings like that, how I felt about these cringe things, I was never going to bring up because I knew what would happen. It would just mean more indoctrination or more false data stripping.
Now, you were when you were in a Class 5 org, it was mostly up in, was it Seattle?
Seattle and also in Hawaii.
And were you ever in Minneapolis, or you just lived in Minneapolis, or you lived in Minnesota?
Well, Minneapolis too, actually. Yeah. I had done a bunch of services there.
Did you guys have the public who would come into the org and they'd be wearing like their flag OT committee bomber jackets or some shit? And I'm thinking to myself, I would see these guys, I'd be like, do you wear that shit in public? Are you what? Ew. You wear that in the world?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not sure which would be cringier, if they actually wore it in the world, or if they're like, I'm going into course today, I'm gonna wear my jacket. So everyone, it's like, so everyone knows that I'm a big deal. I'm kind of a big deal at Flag. Like, you're
Pop the collar.
welcome. You're welcome that I came into course today.
Yeah,
And
grace you
oh
with
my
my
God,
presence.
these people would also act so offended when you would like try to get them to find a misunderstanding, like try to method 3 word clear them or supervisor 2-way com with them. They'd act like, how dare you insult me by implying I don't find all my misunderstood words. And you're like, all right, pump the brakes, buddy.
Yeah.
Just, there's only one way this ends, and that's with you doing what I say.
Jamie, whoops. Jamie Lynn says Tom Cruise's ringtone is probably hip, hip, hooray whenever DM calls.
Oh, that's so great.
Ooh, it's David Miscavige. Hip, hip, hooray. Hip, hip, hooray.
2LRH. Oh, Dave's calling. Dave's calling. Pick up the phone.
Oh my gosh. Oh my God, I might have peed a little. That's so funny. Oh, I'm dying. Okay, so that was, yeah, people laughing out loud in the course room, definitely something that made me feel massively cringe. The other thing that probably more so today, but even in all my years in Scientology, I struggled with this one. It flunk, start, flunk, start.
Did you struggle with it like when it was actually used on course or when people try to talk like this outside of course?
Oh, outside of course would have been even worse. That's a whole nother, that should be one in and of itself. But no, in the course room, and I think it was mainly more with, looking back, I feel like if we were allowed to make language our own in Scientology, maybe if we just said, oh, no, you made a mistake there. And then we were able to just kind of get back to it. But in Scientology, you have to use these rigid, very specific words. And if you're doing a course, you're doing a drill and you're practicing something with somebody and they make a mistake, you have to say flunk. And then you tell them what they flunked on and then start. You start again. I get the start. That's kind of like saying action. But I would rather have said action.
I like it. It'd be so much funnier if in course rooms people said action and cut. But do you remember how after you said flunk, you had to say that's it before having discussions?
Oh, I forgot about that. You're right. You're right. Or if you weren't going to flunk them, but you wanted to throw in something, you had to say, that's it.
That's right. And it's funny because, and I keep forgetting it. I always assume everyone was a course supervisor because I was surrounded by so many course supervisors. But that was just literally my language for life, meaning my life was being on post about 10 hours a day. And that's the language I spoke about 10 hours a day. So saying flunk, start, and that's it was just totally normal. And saying that's it to stop something just became normal. I remember I was hanging out with my, years and years and years ago with my brother and 2 of his friends, and they were like fighting or something. I was like, okay, that's it. And my brother was like, dude, that's not a real thing in the world. I'm like, no, I'm pretty sure it is. I'm pretty sure it is.
He tell you, man, like your cult is showing. Power lies to paralyze. Didn't seeing someone yell at an ashtray make you cringe? Absolutely. Now there's this is a few different courses in Scientology where you take an ashtray and you put it on the chair in front of you, and it's to practice giving commands with intention. You have to use, tell me if I'm getting it wrong, Aaron, because it's been a hot minute. You have to use intention. So you have the ashtray there and you're sitting across from it and you say, stand up. But I can't remember, did we actually pick the ashtray up or did we just leave it there?
No, you made it comply.
You made it comply. And then you would have to thank the ashtray. Thank you. Sit down in that chair. And you put it down. Thank you.
All right, you want to hear something crazy?
Yes. I'm all in. I'm totally for crazy today.
This was one of my favorite drills. And not only doing it, but coaching it was actually one of my favorite drills, only because I was kind of unusually good at it. Okay, now I'm going to defend this drill a little bit because, first of all, I love people talking about yelling at the ashtray. There's one thing I want to correct. Nothing you've said, but what I hear other people say. So there's a part of the drill where you do it silently, and you're telepathically telling the ashtray to stand up, thank you, sit down, thank you. So you do it silently, and you do it normal tone of voice, stand up, thank you. And then you shout. Now, I'm getting the sequence wrong. I can't remember which one comes first, whether it's silently, normal tone of voice, or shouting. And the shouting part of the drill is actually done to make you have the realization that shouting is not intention. Now, in
Isn't that
Scientology,
ironic?
in Scientology, they would define intention as essentially directed thought. Almost like if I were to try to use normal words, you know how they say talk softly and carry a big stick?
Yeah.
Where if you have to shout, you're actually showing weakness. And that if you can do normal tone of voice and get your compliance, that's actually what you're supposed to do. Now, everything I just said is not what L. Ron Hubbard says. I'm just trying to, blend Scientology world with real world stuff. And so shouting at the ashtray is the part of the drill where you're supposed to learn that you don't need to shout. Normal tone of voice is the right way to get across your intention.
What type of course room were you a supervisor for?
The whole thing, the Academy, Theory and Practical. Although I never did the co-audit supervising because honestly, I didn't want to deal with having to listen to all of their people's intimate details. And so I never did co-audit supervision, but I did Theory and Practical.
Wow. So a lot of ashtray yelling going on in your course room.
Yes, because the ashtray yelling drill is done on the upper Indoc TRs course, and it's done on the TRs and objectives course, and it's done on the pro metering course. And so, there's a lot of ashtray yelling. And Scientology has the best ashtrays. Big, big, heavy, glass colored ashtrays. You have some of the coolest big ass glass ashtrays in Scientology course rooms.
Yeah, that's so true. The big amber ones from like the 70s. I
Oh,
wonder where they get them now.
It has to be a square ashtray because there's a part of the drill where he says, "Are you a corner? Are you a corner? Are you a corner? Are you a corner?" You can't have. It's got to be square. So cool. Some really cool ashtrays.
Yeah, that's right. Oh my gosh. I don't know why, since we started talking about the ashtray thing, I started getting really nauseous. But what turns it on turns it off.
The way out is the way through.
Make it go right.
Supreme test of a Thetan
is the ability to make things go right. It's just some of our favorites. It's kind of in the way that I think sometimes people of other religions would, share quotes, but it was just always, that's another thing I didn't like always was being, having people quote LRH to me. That was not fun.
I got to tell you, hearing people make the cheesiest Scientology jokes, like Scientologists to each other, of just like quoting or like, "Oh, that blew down." And you're like, oh my God. I was like, I'm trying to think of other ridiculous. I don't know, how many Scientologists does it take to screw in a light bulb? I don't know. The joke had something to do with a routing foreign. I'm like, the Scientology jokes. There's no good ones. I guess you're not allowed to make good ones anyway, because then you'd really get
you're not, because then and I don't know about you, but so L. Ron Hubbard wrote a policy called jokers and degraders, which I feel like I really represented. But you couldn't make jokes. It really became this twisted thing. You were so afraid to say anything. It's almost like society today in a way. But they just made such a thing about it that you could not joke about it. And growing up in Hawaii, it was such a melting pot. We had so many different nationalities and religions. So growing up, if I slept over my friend's house and, they were going to temple next day, that's what we would do. You would just go with it. Just wasn't a thing. And we would make joke about different nationalities but in a really, not in a mean, cruel way, but really lighthearted and all about it, because we were all minorities. The Filipinos would make fun of the Japanese would make fun of the Filipinos. It just went kind of on and on. Very different. I had to learn when I moved to the mainland that you cannot do that. And I'm still learning.
It's
And
true.
yeah, and because I have so many different nationalities, like I'll make comments sometimes about being Asian. I'm Chinese, like my great grandfather's from China.
Mm.
And but I'm also Hawaiian and Portuguese, Scottish, Irish, and Native American. So it's just I got a lot of jokes.
And it's funny because L. Ron Hubbard didn't say like that if you made like racially insensitive jokes that you were a joker and degrader. It was only whether you were making jokes about Scientology.
Yeah.
You had unhandled evil purposes. You're like,
Oh
oh,
my
geez.
gosh.
I remember when I
So
was a
true.
kid, the first time I got sent to ethics for making a Scientology joke, I was on the Key to Life course, and I was twinned with this young Australian kid. And the promotional booklet for the Key to Life course, on the front of it, shows one of these scales where there's a plate on each side, and there was a key to life, a symbol, a key on one side, and a pile of gold on the other side. And the key to life thing, was heavier than the pile of gold. But the gold said 14 karat on it. And my buddy was like, you want to know why it doesn't say 24 karat? He's like, because if it said 24 karat, the scale would go the other way. And someone heard him say this joke, and I was just laughing. And they sent us to ethics. I was like 13 years old. I'd never been to ethics before. I was like practically crying. And the ethics officer, Haviva Waters at the Sandcastle, put the reference jokers and degraders in front of me. And it said either like you're a suppressive person or you have unhandled evil purposes. And she's like, so which one are you? She's like, this is what L. Ron Hubbard says is what's wrong with people who joke and degrade. So which one of these are you? Is it that you're a suppressive person, or is it that you have unhandled evil purposes? And I was like, are those really the only two choices?
So what did you say? Did you land
I mean,
on one?
it was just a negotiation tactic.
Yeah.
I was like, no, I'm sorry. I'm neither one of those. I will not joke and degrade. My God, please don't send me home.
I will never laugh again unless I'm wearing I'm listening to LRH.
Yeah.
And I
And
think
that's how
he's
you
so
learn.
funny. Yeah.
That's how you learn. Don't make jokes.
Yeah, exactly. Definitely not jokes about Scientology or Scientologists or, God forbid, David Miscavige.
I remember I made a joke one time just to I was a kid, and I made a joke to an adult about COB and cob and corn on the cob or something. And she was like, oh my God, don't say that. Oh my God. I was like,
My
why?
pearls.
My pearls. Where are they? Oh my. Oh. Hold on. I missed. Hold on. I keep getting it wrong. I got to twist them that way. Don't make jokes about COB. Oh, my pearls. There we go.
If they let us, if they allowed that, like if we were allowed to kind of just like blow off some steam and make fun of it, because I make fun of things I absolutely love. It's humor, it's healthy. But we weren't allowed to. They were just so afraid of it being put in a different light for obvious reasons. Now I know, I can tell. Now it's like, oh, now I get it.
Yeah.
So another one I have on my list of the cringeworthy moments inside Scientology when I was a Scientologist, roll calls. All of the roll calls, whether you were a staff member or, I mean, I get in the course room to a degree where it's like, oh, you'd say Aaron, Natalie, and people mostly would say here. And once in a while you get the people, especially in the Sea Org, who would say I, which I found that cringy. I don't know why. It was just something I was always like,
That's right. That's right. Here, I.
Yeah.
Here, I.
It wasn't as bad in the Sea organization itself, because I want to say that that's how we all answered, if I remember, but it was a million years ago now. But doing it when I would be back at a smaller organization, like in Seattle or back in Hawaii, and it's just everyday Scientologists with the I, and I'm like, oh my gosh, we're not in the military. Just stop. Just stop.
Yeah, and Sea Org members, they have muster, and you're talking about roll call. So roll calls for course, but you've got muster in the morning, muster after lunch, muster after dinner, muster at the end of the night for cleaning stations, or muster in the morning for exercise, muster for the morning for post, lunch muster, dinner muster, like 5 musters a day, where everyone has to be present or accounted for. And let's be honest, that's just to make sure nobody escaped.
Yeah, or to
There was
find out
no other
quickly.
there's no other reason for that.
Yeah. Yeah, it was unnecessary, and that's probably why it felt that way too, that it was just like, "Why are we doing this so often?" It just felt like, ugh, definitely cringe. I hated that. Okay, so this is one of my favorite cringe things in Scientology that I cringe so hard on back then, and I do now. Wait for it. Claiming you were a famous person in a past life. You know how many Jesuses I've heard of?
In the Sea Org, there was a couple L. Ron Hubbards.
No, really?
Yeah, and those people would be had a very close eye kept on them by OSA and security, and the slightest slip up, and they were out of there because because in the eyes of the powers that be, anyone who thinks they were L. Ron Hubbard is mentally unstable.
How is he ever supposed to come back?
I know
If
exactly.
because that would be the thing that I mean, they'd be hard pressed to prove it. But there were people too, like other people throughout history. I mean, just going way back, who just so happened to decide that they were that person. And usually you'd hear about it kind of from somebody else. Well, there was so and so, and they're actually were Genghis Khan. You'd be
Yeah.
like, come on. And there were so
And the
many of
thing
them.
is, though, that's interesting is technically you're supposed to get in trouble for talking about stuff like that.
Yeah,
Like that would be considered talking
yeah,
about your case.
yeah, yeah.
And
You're
you're
not supposed
not
to.
allowed to talk about your case. And so it's funny that things like that would get around. I remember this isn't exactly the same thing as what you're saying, but I remember there was this one lady, Bunny Dubin, who was getting auditing at the Advanced Org in LA, and she was in trouble for like having some affair. And she goes, no, it's fine. I spoke to LRH about it, and he understands. He said it was okay. So it's not an over.
This was
She was on
after
OT
Ellery.
5. She's like,
Wow.
she claimed to be in telepathic communication with L. Ron Hubbard, and he said, "Don't worry, it's not an over. You don't have to take it up." And they're
Mhm.
like, "Cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs." As far as people claiming to be LRH, I guess like Miscavige probably has in mind. I was Anne Boleyn. Miscavige probably has in his mind like what the only acceptable reincarnation of L. Ron Hubbard would look like. He's probably like, yeah, the new HCO expediter from Guatemala who just finished the EPF doesn't meet the criteria. Get him out of here.
Yeah, there's just no way. There's just no way. But that is something that was very prevalent in Scientology as well. And a part of that too, for me, that I really didn't like is when some Scientologists would refer to I knew one woman who said that her son was a reincarnation of her dog, that her dog that she had and she loved, and she was in communication with this dog after it has passed and
Oh
kept
my
it there at the house until she could have her son, and it could then inhabit the body of her son, and her son is this dog. All I could think is, I hope you
God.
never say this anywhere in the vicinity of this child.
Oh
Like, she
my
told people
goodness.
this.
My little brother's father, Frank DiMartino, lives here in Clearwater. And his theory is that dogs are executives from the past life, like successful CEOs who just wanted to have a lifetime on vacation. And so he treats his dogs as if they are like the CEOs of businesses, but he treats his dogs better than he treats his wife, Pat. And so he will tell Pat to like get up off the couch because the dog wants to sit there. Like, I'm not kidding. I'm not kidding. This is what he does. He'll be like, Pat, move. The dog wants to sit there.
Are you serious? What would Pat do?
Oh no, she just does what he says. It's pretty sad.
Wow. Nicole
Yeah.
has an interesting question. Were men usually men in past lives and women mostly women? I don't think so, but I would often hear people talking about, well, I prefer to be a woman, or I prefer to have a male body, that kind of a thing. I don't recall, there's nothing, right, Aaron, that ever said that, well, if you're a female in one lifetime that you need to be, I mean, if you can be a dog, right? I mean, I don't think it would matter.
Yeah. I was spared obviously from being exposed to a lot of this stuff. I never did hardly any past life memories and auditing. I mean, for me, it was obviously bullshit. Um, and I never did a lot of auditing on others where this came up. Funnily enough, most of the past life stuff that I came up when I was doing stuff on other people was in false data stripping. I remember this guy from Canada named Nigel Hall. I had to twin up with him on Pro TRs. And this was a time when they were just having everyone do false data stripping just all the time for any reason. And you just even start the false data stripping procedure, and all of a sudden he's like, so I was on a spaceship. And I'm like, oh, come on, dude. I'm like, you're wasting my time. Like, I was so frustrated. I actually got in trouble for violating the auditor's code.
Mhm.
He's like, no, you can't tell him it's not true. I'm like, it's so obviously bullshit. We're just wasting time here. He's like, so I'm on a spaceship. I'm like, yeah, okay, you're on a spaceship, dude. Just, oh my God.
You got to wonder sometimes what it was like for, auditors sitting in a room and you're auditing, you're doing your Scientology auditing with this person, or pre-clear as they call them in Scientology. And they start like, yeah, man, like I totally get the earlier similar here. It must have been when I was Hitler. I mean, you're just usually though, in most cases, it was somebody just more fantastic. Nobody ever claimed
Yeah.
that one. And I saw a comment, somebody asked if anybody ever claimed to be Hitler. Not that I heard of, but multiple times throughout the decades, I would hear of a Jesus for sure. It was a
Yeah.
thing. It was a
Yeah,
whole
this
thing.
thing of demanding and expecting and allowing people to just come up with whatever past life memories they want, and it being completely against the rules to tell them that their
Yeah.
memories are not true. Like, that's not something anyone in Scientology is ever told, that
Yeah.
your past life memories could ever possibly not be true. It creates this delusional state where, like, imagination
Yeah.
is just considered the same as memory. Like, it's not,
Mhm.
you're just remembering something, but you're not granting yourself the beingness that it's memory. And so
Yeah.
someone who's had a ton of auditing just thinks that any random thought that comes into their head practically is an actual memory from some time.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, when you think about that, that's a little on the dangerous side. I mean, you could really I think it really feeds into a lot of the when there's undiagnosed mental illness in Scientology, or just adding to that, it's just one more twist that messes with your head. Because can you imagine believing that in a past life that you were Jesus, and now you're in Scientology? And I mean, the grandeur, and there were that's one thing I didn't like a lot about when I was in Scientology. There did seem to be a fair amount of this kind of pompous, I am absolutely amazing kind of a thing. My shit does not stink at all going on. And it was just further validated, I think, by some of these beliefs of who they were in a past life. And some, maybe they wouldn't get specific about actual people in history, but these ideas of just all these amazing things that they did. And you know what? Maybe it was true. Maybe it wasn't true. What do I know? I'm just saying I found it to be cringe.
Yeah. And this stuff that we're talking about here of just completely indulging or validating these indulgences of your past life recalls, that all happens before you find out about Xenu and the body thetans. So I think some
Mhm.
people wonder, like,
Yeah.
how does anyone get onto OT3 and find out about Xenu and the body thetans and not like get up and walk out? Because by the time you get to that level, by the time L. Ron Hubbard says to you, oh, guess what? You've got just tens of thousands of beings stuck to you. You're like,
Yeah.
oh, okay. I can see that. I can see that. Now, for me, when I talk about having been disappointed when I found out what was on OT3, it
Mhm.
wasn't necessarily that something like that was inconsistent with other things you already know to be true in Scientology. It's just disappointing because I thought what was on the OT levels was so magical that you couldn't even really conceive of what it could be until you got there. And when I read that, I was like, you gotta, that's it? That's the
Yeah.
magic? Where's the magic in that? That's kind of like stupid, to be honest. That's kind of
Yeah.
basic.
Yeah. There are a lot of lectures by L. Ron Hubbard where he really gets into the whole track, as he called it, just so far long ago down, back in our lifetimes where we flew around in space and all these other different experiences. You're right. That shows up in multiple places in his lectures, I know specifically. So when if you listen to some of those, by the time you get to that OT3 and you learn about Xenu and you learn about body thetans, I've always had this theory that, how when you get on those upper levels and you get through OT3, you think you don't have any more body thetans. I'm like, oh, I've gotten rid of all my body thetans. This is so fantastic. Only to find out that no, there's more. And each step, I haven't read everything about the upper levels. I only did through 4. But my understanding is it's more you think that you don't have these beings anymore attached to you. And now you find out that you do. Like what in the
Yeah.
end, like what happens after level 8? I actually don't even know.
Well, nobody knows because L. Ron Hubbard
Mhm.
never released it. But if you do recall,
Well,
L. Ron
880
Hubbard's.
released, but beyond 8. But I mean,
Well,
like OT8
but do you
itself,
know what's
right?
on 8? Do you know what's on 8?
No.
On 8, you go through.
Spoiler alert.
You go through all the past life whole track incidents that you ran in your auditing up until that point, and they basically assess them to determine whether those incidents, those memories, were
Mhm.
actually yours or whether
Or
they
the
belong to a
BTs.
body thetan or a body cluster, or thetan cluster. And so if you remember, do you remember hearing it said that one of the EPs of OT8, the name of OT8 is Truth Revealed, but if you remember,
Yeah.
the end phenomena of OT8 is now you know who you are not, and you are ready to find out who you really are. What that means is you've just learned that most of these memories weren't even yours.
Yeah.
So all the
Wow.
tens of thousands of dollars and hundreds of hours that you spent running these whole track incidents, they weren't yours. Those memories belong to a body thetan or a thetan cluster. And so now you've basically been robbed of this whole track identity you've built up for yourself over the last many years. But the good news is now you're ready to find out who you really are. And it's like, how weird is it
Wow.
that Scientology is basically telling you that you don't know who you really are?
Wow.
That's OT8.
No
Congratulations.
wonder. No wonder some of them
Congratulations.
were upset about it.
Yeah. Your next step is the Purif.
Wow, that's just crazy. That's crazy. I always thought that when you're auditing on the upper levels, you read the material about Xenu and the body thetans, and then you proceed to use the e-meter, because you audit solo. So you connect the cans together on this little dually dad that connects them together, and you hold that so you can work the e-meter and you can hold the cans and go body thetan chasing, and you locate areas of, if I remember right, it was like you look for areas of pain, and then you go to see, you locate these body thetans and you help them leave by running them through this incident, which I can't remember if South Park got into that or not. We'll have to get into a whole video about what it's like to audit on the OT levels, on how, at least in my experience, of making it kind of make sense.
Mm-hmm. Here's one for you. Since you've done 3 and 4,
Yeah.
if you can clear a body thetan. Now because I never did the OT levels myself, I always get confused on the difference between the procedure on OT3 and the procedure on OT5. But if you can clear a body thetan just by asking you, who are you, what are you, who are you, or something like that,
Yeah.
then why do you have to do hundreds of hours of new era Dianetics on a regular thetan in order to clear them? Why can't you just go, what are you, who are you, bang, you're clear? But on a
Yeah.
body thetan that's basically been half dead for a trillennia, you can just go, what are you, who are you? Boom, you're clear. I don't know. Seems like someone's getting a short end of the stick.
Maybe that's the whole idea though, right? Because then you can drag it out. There are a lot of things that I've always thought in Scientology that if we didn't have to, again, I would never have voiced these things in Scientology because I would have immediately been labeled what they call a squirrel, which is somebody who in their eyes alters the technology of Scientology. and you change what L. Ron Hubbard said. And I always thought, going back to that, if we could just speak how we speak. When you're in auditing session, it's so the terminology that you're made to use at times. If you don't speak that way, it just sounds very unnatural. Yet at the same time, you're told you have to sound completely natural. I'm like, well, I wouldn't say half of this to somebody, so I'm not sure how to reconcile this. It was ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. All right, I got another one for you. Are you ready?
Yeah.
All right, so on my list of cringeworthy moments inside Scientology is, and this one didn't apply to everybody, but strapping the confidential materials briefcase to your wrist. So when you get onto the upper levels of Scientology, which are confidential, you are auditing yourself at that point. So you get your folder that you carry around and your materials. And when you leave the course room, for one, when you're in the course room and you've got the books open and you're looking at these materials, you plug them into this thing. Like, you take them off a shelf, you unplug it, then you take it to the table and you plug it in so that nobody leaves with these materials. Security was like next level. So when you're taking your folder and what you're supposed to then go audit, you have to put it into a briefcase, which you have to buy yourself, which I'm like, seriously, like, how much money did we pay to do these levels? And now I got to go to Office Max. And the crazy thing is, they knew exactly where to send people. And these places were keeping them and stocking them. And they were often a metallic looking, well, you'd have your e-meter case, and you had to strap it. If you had all your stuff in there, it's like strapped to your wrist with this cord. And sometimes you had to leave there and then like go grab something to eat and then go to wherever you were doing your auditing. And it was just kind of mortifying because you're strapped. How do you explain why you're strapped to a briefcase? And in this day and age, in this world, the world we live in today, if these people are walking around, I mean, they're used to it, I guess, because they're Scientologists and people know that at the Church of Scientology, they do this. But I mean, you could have anything in there. I mean, you walking around with this thing strapped to you.
It's strapped and it's locked and
Yeah.
it's strapped to you. It's like you're walking around with the nuclear codes.
Yeah.
And apparently, correct me if I'm wrong, when I was in Scientology, I never knew what the hell was in those briefcases, but it's like the platins, which is the commands. And if I understand correctly, like a non-Scientologist reading those things wouldn't even understand what the hell it says.
No,
it wouldn't
and
even
in
make
Hollywood,
any sense to them.
Maybe it's a script, if somebody actually found it.
Yeah. And but in Scientology, especially around the Flag Land Base, walking around with that briefcase strapped to you is like a total status symbol. Cool. It's like, oh yeah, I'm on the level.
I'm on the level. Oh, that's another thing I just hated hearing too. I'm on the level. Are you on the level? I'm on the level. Let's be on the level together. We can't talk about the level or what we do on the level, but we're on the level.
Yeah. Oh,
Super
and now
crazy.
in the advanced org, those you're talking about the course packs, right? So the course packs, they're stored on the shelves and they're plugged in, and you have a certain amount of seconds. When you unplug that course pack, there's a certain amount of seconds that you're required to get the course pack over to the desk and plug it back in. And if it's not plugged in time, all the metal doors in the advanced org lock down automatically. There were so many times. There were so many times at the AO that as SEERG members, we're running to lunch because it's like hamburger day. We're running to lunch and we're all stuck in the building because some douche up in the OT course room didn't plug his course pack in time. And the whole building is locked down, and security's having to run up there and see what's going on. And it's and the irony of the security being like that when all of the OT levels are already on the internet, but Scientology can't admit that what's on the internet are the real OT levels. So they have to keep pretending like what's in the course packs has never been leaked.
Yeah.
And so they have to keep pretending like there's a reason to keep them secure.
Yeah, the handling that they would give people, this is like when I was in and leaving, if they had, seen the South Park episode or something like that, is they were told that what's released on the internet is a squirrel altered version of the data, of the information.
That's right.
So Scientologists who would see it in their mind then would go, oh, no wonder I didn't get the pneumonia and die. It wasn't the real material. Oh, that's right. South Park got it wrong. How could I expect them to get it right?
That's right.
So Stephanie says, super nerding. Would another Scientologist attempt to look in a briefcase? Hell no.
No.
Absolutely not. It's one thing, I think that I would say this about most dedicated Scientologists, the discipline that you use on yourself to not stray or do things like that, it's so strong that you just would never even think about it. I don't even know what the equivalent would be in another in another in another religion. You just
The
wouldn't
thing
wouldn't
is,
do it.
it wouldn't be possible to try. You're not even allowed to unlock the briefcase unless you're in another locked room.
Yeah.
And so, like my wife's parents, when they were auditing on OT7, when you're auditing on OT7, you audit yourself at home. Before they
Mhm.
approve you to audit at home, you've got to install a safe. You've got to show your auditing space. You've got to have a deadbolt on there. And it would get this crazy. It would get this crazy. Like my wife's mom, Ann Tozier, she would put her OT materials in the safe. She would shut the safe. She would lock the safe. She would then shut the closet door, but forget to lock the closet door.
Ooh, she got to do
And then she would
liability.
and then she would tell the ethics officer that she forgot to lock the closet door. Nobody accessed the materials, but
Yeah.
and nobody could have gotten into the safe. But just because she forgot to lock the door that the safe was in, she would have to do lower conditions and all this kind of stuff. Like the security in Scientology is it's crazy to think. It's crazy for normal people to understand how secretly they keep those secrets and how seriously they take it.
Yeah, it really is. And I will give them props for, keeping the whole Xenu thing under wraps for as long as they did. And even once it once it was already out, the way that they would handle Scientologists by telling them it wasn't the real information. They just if they just took some of that energy and time that they put into trying to hide things or cover them up and actually fix what's wrong, make changes within the organization, stop financially assaulting people and more. It just I always was like, why not work on that? Because some of these things, even when I was a very dedicated Scientologist, would hear something would come up and somebody would have an upset and I'd be like, well, yeah, I can see that. I would be upset too. But it's never Scientology. It's the other people. It's the person.
Always, always,
Always.
always, always.
You're just in this completely just gaslighting abusive relationship. And then you can't get rid of them. Trying to get off the mailing list for the Church of Scientology, it's like worse than having herpes. It just does not go away. And for the record, I do not have herpes. I was just making a joke. But you just can't get rid of it. Or you think it's gone, right? You think like, I'm not gotten any mail, and then boom, cold sore. Over and over and over and over again. All right, I think I have another one here. Okay, so we did strapping the briefcase. This was one for me, and this applies specifically to the Sea Org and what I think is cringe. And I'm sure all of you would agree now that it's absolutely cringe. But even in the Sea Organization, I struggled with this one, and it was the uniform. The Sea Org uniform, it has changed over the years. Back in my day, everybody pretty much wore the same one. Then certain orgs would wear all white. This cross between Pan Am, more generic. It had like the cross tie thing that the women had to wear. I hated that. You had to, you know what I'm talking about? There is a name for that thing.
Oh yeah.
What is that thing called?
It's not
It's like a
it's
tie.
not an ascot. What is it?
Eat
Yeah.
more pizza now. I'm always amazed, but never surprised at what the cult has done. Hi, Osa. I know. It's hilarious. And I can't tell you how, I know for me, how I think it's just so healing to be able to freely talk about these things and laugh about it and Nobody ain't got shit to say.
So
But the
you must have
uniform.
been wearing like the CLO
Yes.
Sea Org uniform where
Yes, it was the Dunder
for
Mifflin.
s-
Everybody yeah.
how did they manage to have a skirt that made every woman look like they had some huge belly? It was so
I
like
know.
the cut and the fit on that thing was so awkward.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Asho Foundation had the absolute worst uniforms of all the Sea Org members. But that was even after they sort of got rid of the military style uniforms. For a long time now, the service orgs don't really have the military style uniforms except for Sea Org Day. And even the celebrity center's uniforms was like, who came up with who put this together and was like, that looks good.
I know. When they did a whole there was a whole mission to redo the uniforms back in the 80s. I think it was I think it was before my daughter was born. That was 90. So it was the late 80s. And they were going to redo the uniforms. And what they came up with just wasn't a whole ton better. And then they redid them again years later where they look like flight attendants. And that might have been in your day, Aaron, when you were at the Advanced Org in Los Angeles. Do you remember that?
So by the time I was at PAC, pretty much AOLA and ASHO had uniforms that basically just looked like a shirt and a tie.
Mm.
But the girls had like a fluffy scarf. But before that, is like the cow tongue where it came together, but it looked like a cow tongue kind of. And but wait, which one are you talking about? You're talking
There
about
was where it had even wasn't there once, and hopefully if there's any ex-Sea Org members there in the chat, wasn't there once where there were all these uniforms designed and they look like flight attendants? And I remember them being shared, but ended up, I mean, it was almost like there were capes or something. It was weird. I don't know where that came. They were trying to go for some kind of futuristic Star Trek look, I think.
I remember when they were starting the Ideal Org stuff, and I remember we were shown a presentation of what the new staff uniform for all Ideal Orgs would look
Yes,
like.
yes,
And it was San
yes.
Francisco. There was a freaking cloak,
Yes,
literally like a
yes,
cloak.
yes.
And you're like, are we going to have parties on Friday night?
Yeah.
What is happening here? Now, of course, it was all just like digital renderings, like, but it must just be someone shows it to Miscavige, and Miscavige is like, that's going to be the hip new look of Scientology staff. All the young people will want to join staff if they know they're going to get free uniforms that look like they're about to attend an Eastern European cocktail party
Yeah,
in
no
the
kidding.
1800s
Yeah.
or something.
Harry Potter, like, fan event or something. I mean, but then that was before Harry Potter, so it couldn't even
Yeah.
say that, but you're right. But if I recall, it never was produced. It's not something that came
Right.
out. I don't remember in person ever seeing anyone in a cloak, thank God.
No.
But yeah, it was a whole, like, how, and again, you can't say shit about it. You gotta look and be like, "Oh, mhm, mhm, mhm."
But what they ended up coming out with is this copper colored corset vest that
Phantom of the OT.
makes every staff member in the world look like a valet. Like you
Yeah.
can't go shopping anywhere without someone asking you where to find things.
Yeah. Yeah, you're totally right. It'd be like showing up to Target with a red shirt and khakis.
Yeah.
It was how did they not put this together? Who thought these no one thought it through, obviously. But as crazy as Scientology could be about their surveys, surveying this, survey that, the central marketing unit used to do all of those surveys to determine how book covers could look and all of that. Where was the survey about the staff and the Sea Organization uniforms? I don't remember doing one. Maybe there was,
Yeah.
but what they came out with was next level, and it was all over the place.
Yeah. To me, the clue that David Miscavige seemed to know he was making everybody look ridiculous is that the uniforms for RTC looked really, really good. And the
Mhm.
uniforms for the CMO looked good. And the uniforms for everyone else looked absurd.
Yeah.
And there's no way he didn't know that. There's no way that wasn't somehow a way to just make you feel silly or feel less. Because the guy clearly knows the difference between what looks good and what doesn't.
Yeah. That's what was so crazy too. And I remember looking at these things. I think I was at an event. I must have been a public person by then, and it just got quiet. You know? It's like it was a slow clap start, and then everybody realized they better be clapping for these uniforms. It was so bad.
Yeah.
I'm so glad I do not need to wear a uniform anymore. Um, okay, so also on my list, and I think this is probably it. I didn't start out this way feeling cringe about him. It started happening later, and then absolutely ever since I've left Scientology, I think one of the most cringe things about being a Scientologist is Tom Cruise. In the beginning it was like, "Oh, cool, Tom Cruise is a Scientologist. That's cool because you wanna relate, you wanna representation matters, you wanna know there's other Scientologists out there." And that was such a big thing when he came back, although at the time, we didn't know that he had drifted away from the church and came back.
Right.
Remember? We just thought that,
Yeah.
"Oh, he just has become more vocal or whatever." But he never that I didn't know until well after I left Scientology that I found out about how he'd actually left. Him and Nicole were pulling away, and it's when they were filming Eyes Wide Shut, and David Miscavige wasn't able to get a hold of him. They must have changed his ringtone. It wasn't,
Yeah.
it just kept was like that. And then when he came back in, and the story's been shared online and in multiple places about how what happened to split them up to, highlight that all of a sudden Nicole Kidman is a suppressive person and going as far as even turning, having the church turn her children against them. But
Yeah.
like you said, who did you say this? Somebody said it the other day on a live, how just saying Tom Cruise creates more suppressive people than anybody that we know.
That's right. He's like, "Have you ever seen an SP?" And it's like, all your wives are SPs. What are you
Yeah.
talking about?
Every woman you've married.
Yeah. You create SPs. You're an SP factory.
Yeah, completely. Now, I'm curious about this. Now, when he jumped on Oprah's couch, when that was happening, which
Yeah.
I can't remember if I must have been out by then because that was or I was leaving. I was in process of leaving, I think. I wasn't as bothered by the couch jumping, to be honest. Like that is of all of the things about him, I was more bothered by, and this wasn't all over Oprah, but the fact that he used, slave labor on the backs of Sea Org members to redo his hangar, his airplane hangar, and other things like that. That and maybe that's why that those things when he was actually jumping on the couch, maybe it's because it's just me and I'm a hopeless romantic. I was like, "Ah, that's so cute.
I
My man is
remember
not
not
jumping
being
on a couch."
I remember not being bothered by the slave labor part of it. I remember thinking those Sea Org members probably got to eat pizza. Good for them.
At
I'm
least they
like
got
that.
to leave the base.
I'm like, they probably had fun. Are you kidding me?
Mhm.
It was probably better than what their normal day would have been. They got to, be in a nice, awesome, cool hangar. But I was actually still in the Sea Org when Tom Cruise did the couch jumping thing. So we were a
Oh, wow.
little bit shielded from it. But I remember, my wife and I did actually have a car in the Sea Org, and I would drive some
Wow.
places. And I remember the way I was exposed to what Tom Cruise had done was by hearing about it on the radio. And I heard about it on the radio because, no matter what time of day you're driving, there's some radio show on, there's some a DJ who's like makes jokes about everything. All
Yeah.
of a sudden, Tom Cruise was the butt of jokes everywhere.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, the tone of the conversations about Tom Cruise took a very sharp and abrupt turn where now it was okay to make fun of Tom Cruise. That had never happened before. Nobody had a reason to make fun of Tom Cruise before. And now all of a sudden he was a joke. He was a meme. And I remember thinking, they say there's no such thing as bad press, but I'm not so sure about that.
Well, that's when he
it's
was
funny.
also on the Tom Cruise crazy train tour. It didn't stop with the couch.
Yeah. And, in some ways people, some people might say if Tom Cruise left Scientology, he's the one person who could absolutely destroy Scientology if he left. And I go, I don't know. Scientology is kind of being destroyed already, even with him in it. I'm sure if he left, it would accelerate the process. But to show you how Tom Cruise, is one of the cringiest things about Scientology. Look how Scientology continues to fail and shrink and flounder, even with Tom Cruise. So one might wonder: is it failing despite of Tom Cruise, or is it failing in part because of Tom Cruise? I don't know. What do you guys think in the live chat? Let me know what you think.
Yeah, that's a good point because it did seem to kind of go that way. In the beginning, it was like because part of when he got his Medal of Valor, I think it was called, they were
Yeah,
sharing these things that he'd done and how he'd go and he'd speak to these people, and he got all these people in Scientology and introduced to Scientology. If you closely listen at these events and you pay attention to the words they're using, they're not often saying like he got 50 people into Scientology onto the blah blah blah. It's he introduced millions
that's
of
right.
people to Scientology. It's like he didn't really I've never really heard from anybody how much he actually really did do that would be that as a Sea Org member that we would have to show a statistic for and show that this is, these are our numbers, this is what I did. Was
That's
that
right.
something was that part of bringing him back into the fold, getting him that medal, do you know?
It was after he was already back in the fold. This was probably just to really acknowledge him and maybe keep him in the fold.
Mm,
Um, no, because let's look up, when did Tom and Nicole divorce? When did Tom? Because by the time they divorced, Tom was already back in the fold. Uh,
yeah.
they divorced. 2001. He got his medal, I think, in 2004, late 2004.
Oh, okay.
And so, yes, it was probably, to put a cherry on that cake of everything he
Yeah.
had done in the 3 years since the divorce from Nicole.
So he got that in 2004. So I was definitely still in Scientology then, and I was a parishioner. That's the year that I had to go get my daughter and break her out of the Sea Org in Los Angeles, and I had to go square up with Ben Monahan.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that was 2004. Shelby, my daughter, if you go over to my channel, which by the way, be sure to subscribe to my channel if you have not already. My daughter shares in a live from the other day her story of leaving Scientology and how we broke her out. And I forgot about this, but the story that was told to Scientologists was that I kidnapped my daughter. Which I guess I did because I got her off of the base and then sent her to Mexico to try and get her away from them. But she shares her whole story, and it's fascinating to hear it from her perspective. For me, it's heartbreaking at the same time. But in looking now at everything that was happening around that time too, if that's when, Tom was getting his medal, and then later the couch jumping started, which is when he met Katie Holmes. And he had done some other that wasn't that also about the time when he went off on Brooke Shields?
He was doing this was his whole War of the Worlds press junket.
That's
And
right.
one of the big deals that was made, not just when he got his award, but before he got his award, he was at Flag, either getting on to OT7, and he spoke at graduation, and he did a whole slide deck presentation showing photos of the
Yeah.
giant volunteer minister tent that he had put up on the set of War of the Worlds. And the idea that was being created was that he was basically just infiltrating the highest levels of Hollywood with all sorts of Scientology tech, and that Steven Spielberg was on board and all these other big actors were on board. And it's like, Tom is taking over Hollywood with Scientology. And, as crazy as he was in his actual press junket, he was even crazier behind the scenes at Flag
Yeah.
graduations. And
Really? So he would
Scientologists were
act did
just
you ever see him?
drinking. I did not. I was not
Yeah.
allowed on the base at this time, but all my friends were. I was the black sheep.
But he would
But
speak at Flag graduations?
yes, when he was there, when he was getting onto OT7.
Wow. So would he just kind of I mean, what were some of the do you recall at all, like, what he did or said?
it kind of like the speech you give with David Miscavige on the IS event with David Miscavige, where it's real inside baseball, kind of like, are we going to clean this place up, you guys? And I got you back. I'm here. Like, we're getting it done. You can count on me. And it's like, oh, Tom Cruise is the best. And it's funny. Someone mentioned to me, someone was like, can you name one person that Tom Cruise has actually gotten into Scientology?
Yeah.
Who stayed? Like,
His
Nicole
sister?
was gone. Katie. Oh, well, but I guess if you want to give him credit for his sisters, but I remember thinking that I thought Tom Cruise got Will Smith into Scientology, and someone who knew a little better than I did pointed out, like, Will has never said that. Tom has never said that. Scientology has never said that. Is there a single person Tom Cruise has actually gotten into Scientology? And that's why when they talk about what Tom's done for Scientology, they'll say introduced. And they're like, so yeah, if you calculate up the audiences of the programs where Tom Cruise said the word Scientology, that's how they calculate how many people Tom has introduced to Scientology. It's got nothing to do with whether those people actually got into Scientology.
Yeah. Do you think at any point, I know that and for me, a big cringe thing was when he said the things that he did about Brooke Shields and postpartum depression. And I remember watching that because even as I don't remember what year that was, so I can't completely remember exactly where my mindset was, but I was so shocked. I'm like, even for a Scientologist that's next level, like, where is your PR team? And that's, of course, when he had fired his long-term PR person and hired his sister, Leanne. Leanne was doing his PR then? And there was no one saying, hey, dude, because it seemed like, what was his previous PR person? It was Pat something.
Kingsley.
It seemed like she kind of kept him in check a bit on, like, hey, let's keep Scientology over here and let's do what we're here to do, which is to promote a movie and talk about these things. And he got rid of her. He brought in the sister. And then the whole War of the Worlds thing with the movie, with his press junket, became this whole anti-psychiatry thing with Matt Lauer and the whole Brooke Shields thing. Where was the Scientology PR people? Where was Owen Hubbard? He had tons of policies on public relations. They had some tools, there was safe pointing. It's like, where was all of that? It just completely went out the window.
Well, the thing is, they have all these marketing and PR policies and tools, quote unquote, but you go, but where's the evidence that those things are even good? Scientology's PR has been horrible forever. So, like, they say that Scientologists are like, oh, they got the PR tech, and are you a trained PR? And you're like, yeah, but Scientology's PR is horrible. So how good is your PR training? And from what I've heard, Miscavige absolutely hated Pat Kingsley because she would never let Tom talk about Scientology. And there's even a story out there of Tommy Davis. Oh my God, I hope I'm getting the details of this story right. Tommy Davis basically put a blackmail file together on Pat Kingsley, and Tommy Davis assisted in the firing of Pat Kingsley, and basically was like, yeah, you're basically going to keep your mouth shut, or we're going to reveal X, Y, and Z about you. Wow. And so, like, there was no one who knew what they were doing advising Tom Cruise after that point.
Yeah, he was just doing his own thing. Do you think, because for a while, Tommy Davis was his handler, right? was involved with him. They were those pictures.
Tommy Davis was more like his
honeymoon.
I think Tommy was more like his bitch boy. Yeah. Like his little gopher. Like, I don't know if anyone could be described as Tom's handler. But he was sort of assigned to him. Well, because and also Tommy's wife was auditing Katie. So Jessica Feshbach was auditing Katie. Yeah.
Because didn't he go with them on their honeymoon after Tom and Katie got married? Because that's not weird.
Yeah.
That's absolutely insane. What is happening with him these days? I feel like I haven't heard anything about Tommy Davis.
Oh, he's out of the Sea Org. He's out of Scientology. Yeah. He's married to a non-Scientologist.
Wait, he's out of Scientology?
Yeah, I mean, he hasn't been declared. He's never spoken out, but he has no involvement with Scientology. Like if a reporter calls him, he will defend David Miscavige because he has to. They have so much dirt on Tommy. They have so much dirt on Tommy. So Tommy's like Marty Rathbun. He's an owned dog, is what Tommy Davis is. But yeah, no, he's not active in Scientology at all.
That's interesting. It didn't seem like it, but once in a while he would pop up, and you're right. He'd be defending Scientology.
Yeah. Only because someone's contacting him. Like he's at this point, he's just like Marty Rathbun.
Wow. I wonder what he's doing for work now. That's the thing I always wonder about people who are in the Sea Org like that. What do you do
his
now for a
father's
living?
incredibly wealthy. So
Oh,
and has tons of connections. So when Tommy left the Sea Org, he ended up working for James Packer. He ended up working for billionaire James Packer. He ended up running the movie production company that James Packer started with another big Hollywood name. So yeah, I mean, Tommy continued to work in very powerful circles. And I think he married into a very wealthy family as well. Tommy's just fine, which to me makes it all the more pathetic that he doesn't actually speak out. Tommy could really burn some things to the ground. And but I think Tommy's mom, Ann Archer, is still a true believer from what we can tell. But I think Tommy's biological father is incredibly wealthy and has actually never been a Scientologist. Tommy's father's never been a Scientologist, to my understanding.
is his mom still married to his biological father?
No. Terry Jastrow is Ann Archer's husband, and he's a successful TV producer himself. But I think Terry is Tommy's stepdad, and that Tommy's biological dad was never in Scientology, but in his own right is a very wealthy guy.
Wow. So pretty much once his mom either leaves or, when she passes away, I wonder if he will still feel compelled to be quiet. Because I just have a really hard time believing that there really is that loyalty for him. I think it's more what you're saying. I think he's more that he knows that there's a blackmail file on him and he's not willing for any of that to come out. But I just want to say this, Tommy Davis, if you ever want to share your story, hit a girl up.
I think for Tommy, I mean, yes, of course, there's a ton of blackmail, but I think for Tommy, it's more like, why does he need the trouble? Like, even if Tommy wasn't terribly concerned about the blackmail info, he's like, I don't have the time or the attention or the care to pick this fight. I'm having a fine time just living my life. Who gives a shit? Whereas me, I'm motivated by pure revenge. So, Tommy's probably like, I don't care. I don't need the fight. I'm like, oh, I need the fight. We're doing this.
I don't think of it in terms of, I totally get the revenge thing completely. For me, it's more it's two things. One, it's the people left behind who I know if somebody wants to stay in that situation or practice Scientology, whatever. But I know that there are so many people that were like me, where you wanted to leave, but you knew that you could lose your whole family, and you weren't willing to do that. Those people. And the other part of it is I was able to leave so much. I was helped so much by seeing so many Scientologists come out and share their story, especially people who were international executives, spilling the beans and becoming whistleblowers. That helped me as somebody who was lurking for 2 years on the internet as I was planning my escape with my family. It was more affirmation for me that, okay, I'm not crazy, because if you go to Scientology and you're like, you know what, I'm done, I want to leave, I have doubts, then immediately they want to get you into reprogramming again and get all of that sorted out and find out what you're doing against Scientology. Because if you want to leave, regardless of what it might have happened to you, you must have done something. I feel like that helped me so much. So it's like, if I can share my story and other stories and people share those stories, then it really normalizes. And the third thing is being able to talk about these things freely, especially on a platform like this. It's so healing, but I gotta be honest, this is not something I've shared at all. I mean, I've been only listen to me, I only been living this YouTube life for like a week. I'm all like, "Yeah." Last it was like a week ago Thursday when we did our video, and then we did another one a few days after that, and it wasn't till the 3rd one that I didn't throw up afterwards, and it
Really?
wasn't right afterwards. Yeah, it was like the next day. I woke both times and I was throwing up and just sick to my stomach, and I thought at first I thought maybe I had a bug or something, and really I could have, but then I was fine for 2, 3 days, and then you and I did another video, and the next day,
Oh my
the whole thing blew up
goodness.
again for me, and so I worked from home for a couple days and took it easy. I wasn't feeling great at all, and then I bounced right back, and interestingly, after I kinda realized, like, okay, it could have been something I ate or I picked up a bug, but I could feel that there even though I believe in doing this and sharing this story, these are things that I've never been able to talk about freely, and doing that and sharing it and putting yourself out there, it's just it can feel a little overwhelming, but in such a good way, if that makes sense, because exercising that freedom to be able to communicate and share these things feels so good. But then the next day, even though things like the response was so positive and just really encouraging comments, I literally just went and threw up. I think it was just like this,
Wow.
like my body just couldn't even handle just that level of what was coming out of me. It's been like this fire hose because I've not talked about it for such a long time. Did you find that, or you just seem like you're always just cool as a cucumber? You're probably not vomiting afterwards.
No, definitely not vomiting. Transitioning from pre-recording and editing videos to doing live videos
Mm,
has changed my entire approach and how I feel about videos in general. When I was pre-recording and editing, I would get very nervous and anxious because
mm,
every time I would stumble or hesitate, I'd redo it and redo it. I'd be like, "Hello, everyone, welcome back to Growing Up in Scientology." I would record that 20 times sometimes
yeah.
because I just criticism, being introverted on it. Switching to doing lives has forced myself to do all of my content as if I just had a friend sitting in front of me that I was having a conversation with. And if you're having a conversation with someone in real life, you don't worry about whether you're getting tongue tied. If you get tongue tied, you just
Yeah.
give yourself a second and spit out what it is you're trying to say. So I no longer get nervous about it. I used to get nervous just sitting down, even without an audience and just looking at my camera to pre-record. I'd get
Yeah.
sweaty and oh my God, my notes, my notes, my notes. I don't worry about any of that anymore. Thank
Yeah.
God.
Yeah, I really like doing the lives because I just, like, can't sit down and edit something and do all that. I just don't wanna do that, so I'm just gonna
Yeah.
do them live. Sharona, sounds like your body wanted to get rid of what you went through as well as your brain. Yes, that is really what it felt like. I felt so good about what we did and the conversation, and it felt really healing, but it opened up other wounds in a way, but I felt like that needed to be done because the more and more that I know for me that I talk about this, the more I can look at it and go, "Oh, yeah." And it's like all of that, I don't know how else to describe it, but like all the energy and the anxiety around it starts to dissipate every single time. And the more freely, and that's why I wanted to talk today about these cringe moments because never been able to talk about it. And there's never been a time when there were so many people who had never been in Scientology who are following this topic and cults in
Yeah.
general who know enough about it that they get the joke too.
Yeah.
I think the people never in Scientology coming up with some of these jokes are absolutely hilarious.
Yeah.
It,
Yeah. Yeah.
I just
It
love
really is
all of them.
amazing. It
I have a
is.
million t-shirts I want to have made with all of these different sayings.
Yeah. Let me say a couple more words about the revenge thing.
Yeah.
Um, because some people might think like revenge isn't like, slashing someone's tires or throwing rocks through the windows. Like for me, revenge is every single day. It's like looking right at Dave and being like, look at what we're doing, Dave. There's
Yeah.
not a single thing you can do about it. Hey, remember back when I said that you didn't really have to destroy my family? There would be a better way. Remember when I said you didn't have to destroy my wife's family? There could be a better way. Remember when you guys refused to just do the right thing? Now you're going to pay. Now we're going to do this in a way where we have an almost unlimited audience. Now we're going to do it in a way where you can't gatekeep. You can't threaten producers. You can't threaten publishers. You can't threaten sponsors. You can't. Now we're going to do it in a way where even if you send PIs, we're going to create content and we're going to use that to get the word out more broadly. Like revenge, I use that word because it feels like the right word. But the best revenge is to do what we're doing in the most effective way possible. It doesn't necessarily mean being nasty, although sometimes being nasty is the most effective way possible. But it means succeeding. It means going, hey, Dave, did it ever occur to you that everything that's happening right now, that you pulled this in? That you did something, Dave, to pull this in? This is all your fault.
I know.
And anyway, that's kind of what I mean.
I think David Miscavige probably needs to write up his overts and withholds against you, Aaron.
Yes, he
Then
needs
maybe,
the PTS rundown. He needs the PTS and suppressed person rundown, probably.
Why is it too that in Scientology, when you talk about the subject of PTS, potential trouble sources, who are people who are allegedly connected to suppressive persons, and you're always looking for the suppressive person if you get sick or you're making a bunch of mistakes and all that. But it's never, or you're looking for maybe okay, what did I do that I might have pulled this in, kind of a thing, right? Where did I create antagonism? Did I create any antagonism with this person that would make them feel that way about me in Scientology? Yet not one freaking time does Scientology do that themselves.
That's right.
It just has always blew my mind because we were literally trained to look and go, okay, I got to take responsibility for anything that I might have done to create some antagonism here.
That's
Yet
right.
it never went the other way.
That's
And we
right.
never said, nobody hardly ever, in fact, I don't think anybody ever said anything about it because you didn't want to have to go redo the whole course.
That's right. And that's something that I think if people who are still living inside the bubble think about for just a few minutes, they'll realize how the entire Scientology philosophy is like a heads, we win, tails, you lose.
Yeah.
Okay. If someone's antagonistic to you as a person, you're supposed to figure out what you did to create that antagonism. But if someone's antagonistic to Scientology, it's because they have crimes and overts and are suppressive people. It's like, it doesn't compute, guys. Just think about it.
Or even the title, the name of the PTS course, the potential trouble source course, where you're going to learn and get the skills to be able to confront and shatter suppression. Yet, what does every Scientologist have to do the minute somebody, gets on the shit list or is, excommunicated and declared a suppressive person? They can't confront them. One time I was in Clearwater. I was there. We were doing one of those Sea Org reunions back in the day, and we'd all went to, I think I told you about this, where we were over by the Starbucks in Clearwater. And I was leaving Florida then. I was leaving to go back to Minnesota. And I walk onto the plane, and sitting right there are two OT8s from my area who I knew really well. Like I genuinely liked them, and they mostly were really good friends with my mom. And I walked up, and you know how you got to kind of wait because you're walking through? Like where I had to stop with the line was right next to them. And at first I forgot about the whole Scientology thing and that I was a declared SP and they were OT8s. All I saw were two people that were good friends with my mom. So I was like, hey. And at first, the wife kind of getting one of these smiles. And then they both just move their bodies and just look the other way out the window, like the airplane was taken off. It was the craziest thing. I'm like, you've both done this course probably more than one time where you're supposed to be able to confront and shatter suppression. Yet your handling is, No, I don't see her. You see her? I don't see her. I don't see her. We can't make eye contact because it's like Medusa. We're gonna freeze. We're gonna turn to stone. I felt so powerful.
Yeah. Two of my best friends before I got declared were Paul Stein and Diane Stein. And Diane used to be the director of special affairs for the Atlanta org, and she is currently the president of CCHR in Clearwater.
Ooh,
She is supposed to be one of the fiercest warriors on the front lines of the Scientology fighting suppression and psychiatrists. Boy, I remember a time not that long ago when I was walking up North Fort Harrison and I was getting to an intersection. They were walking the other way. Now they handle the biggest bag of the biggest bad of suppressive persons in the world because it's the evil psychs and big pharma. When they saw me coming, they were like, "Oh!" and they immediately turned and pretended to be looking in the window of the store that they happened to be at. They're like, "Oh my God, just don't look at Aaron. Don't acknowledge him. Maybe he'll go away." I was like, "Oh my God, it's so pathetic."
yeah. And they all do it. Thank you, Ben Turner. I have to know,
Mhm.
how do Scientologists reconcile DM is supposed to be the biggest being on the planet, yet he can't even stand up to Laura FM? They don't know. That's how they
Yeah.
reconcile it. They don't know. They don't look at anything outside of Scientology, let alone, here on YouTube. It just, they don't know. That's why I encourage people. And I want to figure out how to make more shorts so it's easier to share. But short form content on social media, it's just going to be, it will get into their feed
Oh yeah.
because it's not, anti-Scientology or Scientology. I mean, the subject is Scientology. So I don't know a ton about an algorithm, but it sounds like that would work. And each Scientologist I've ever seen since I've left Scientology, that has been their response where they look away. I had one person in Costco come behind me. And again, it was somebody I felt fond of. And I've thought that's so interesting that when I have seen these people since leaving, not many of them, but some, my initial reaction is I it's somebody that I liked. It's somebody that I knew before, and I'm not even thinking about Scientology. So I'll turn around and smile, and they literally walk away.
I know.
I just
It's crazy.
confront and I shatter them with my smile.
It's crazy. If Scientologists were really expected to be able to confront and shatter suppression, then any of my old Scientology friends, if they encountered me on the sidewalk, should be expected to or allowed to or want to take a moment to talk to me, see how I'm doing, see what's going on, see if they can get me back, see whatever. Like that's just how normal human beings would
Yeah.
operate, especially normal human beings who tell themselves that they have the only technology to confront and shatter suppression.
Yeah.
And yet they go, "Oh my God, don't," or run away, or
Yeah.
like it's honestly, Scientologists manage to convince themselves time and time again of the exact opposite of what's really true. We're
Mhm.
confronting and shattering suppression while they're running out of the grocery store because a big bad SP just walked in. Like
Yeah.
this is why people wonder, how can you be in a cult? Because they don't think they're in a cult. They don't know they're in a
No.
cult. Like they think they're the opposite of a cult. Like it's really, unless you've been there or experienced it in some way or some other high control group, it's really hard to understand how minds can be like
Yeah.
completely 180'd.
Yeah. I think it's interesting for me to continue. Like I said, when we talk about these things and they share it, it helps me kind of peek back into my mindset at the time. And even in my days of being the most dedicated Scientologist, there were still many things where I was like, oh, I don't know about that. Or I felt uncomfortable about that. I remember once, not long before I left. I might have been during when I was working on my exit plan. Actually, no, it was earlier. It was 2004, 2005, because I remember because that was when my daughter had left to go into the Sea Org. And I was just feeling really, now I look back and knowing what I don't know today, just felt really depressed. I was experiencing some depression, but I did not know that. I just thought that, why am I so happy? I'm, at this level on the bridge to total freedom, but I'm still so unhappy. And what's making me more unhappy is being forced to pretend that I'm happy and
Mm.
pretend that everything is just fine. And then when I finally go do something on my own that is fun, like strip fitness or something like that, I get in trouble for it. There's no freedom. The higher I went up this bridge to total freedom, the more controlled I became. Yet they sell it to you as you're going to be more free. I mean, it's called the bridge to total freedom. And it is the exact polar opposite because they start dictating how you should behaving, how you should behave. And I remember thinking, hey, if we are all individuals, right? We have our own personalities, our own beingness, as they called it. We are all who we are. Then why can someone say anything about how I am or who I am or what I'm doing? And if I've gotten further up this thing, and if it's supposed to make me more free, wouldn't I be more comfortable with being who I was? Instead, the further you move up this thing, the more they strip away who you are and they replace it with that roboticness. And that's why I think so much of shedding that cult culture is doing just that, just getting rid of it, getting rid of the language. And I find what helps me is replacing it with something else, not another cult and not ice cream, but sometimes, but learning other things, creativity, I've been having a lot of fun figuring out the whole YouTube thing, just doing other things that are creative that I enjoy doing. I wish I could have done that, when I was in Scientology, and they just completely are like, no, those are, what do they call it? Not other practices. Although
Other
my
fish to fry.
other fish to fry. Exactly. Ooh, that should be on the cringe list. Other fish to fry. You have other fish to fry. Then what fish am I frying now? Like I never really even understood that fully.
He's off the rails, other fish to fry, other intentioned. How about that one?
Oh
Other
my
intentioned.
gosh. We got to keep a master list. And maybe if I say them a few times, it'll kind of take away some of the absolute cringe about it. But some of these things you hear so much growing up, and now they're absolutely hilarious, but totally cringe instead. But maybe if we kept a list, then when people come out of Scientology or come out of this organization, we can go, okay, see this list? Anything you want to say about it is perfectly safe and fine. Like that's what I think would be so cool. And people that I've talked to who have left Scientology since I've left it takes a little bit of time, I think, but get to the point where it's like they're able to make fun of it, which is kind of what we're doing today with some of these cringe items. But I think that's very healthy.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to have to go help my girls cut down a tree here pretty shortly. But are there any comments you wanted to take up before we dip?
Oh, well, Jazzy wants fried fish now. I saw that one. Maybe you should put on the OT level course videos. Are there such thing? Meandering Black Sheep?
There are a few films, super confidential films that I've never seen for people doing their solo auditor training. Don't run your case on me.
Or no case on post.
Yeah, the R60W films and the OT level films, if there are any, have never leaked, to the best of my knowledge.
Okay, so
yeah, the clearing course films and any solo, no, literally cut down a tree. I got to go cut down a tree. So Steve Britton's like, cut down a tree. It's not. Yeah, that's not an expression. It's a literal thing. Yeah, I don't know. There's a lot of videos already done about the OT levels, but eventually I'll get around to doing more of them. No, you and I need to do a video about the OT levels because you did 3 and 4.
Yeah, definitely. That is on the list for sure. For sure. Yeah, I think oh, thank you. You know what's so funny? I really don't to me it's nails on a chalkboard. But
no,
thank
you have
you.
a great
I appreciate
podcast
that.
voice.
Which is great because I do a podcast. So I'm really glad.
Yeah.
That's good because I listen to it and I'm like, oh my God. Case on post shortens to COP. And if you're not familiar, that's something you were always told as a staff member or a Sea Org member that, you can't basically dramatize. You can't, anytime if you have a disagreement, it's case on post because your case is what you're supposed to handle in auditing. So it was
Right.
just a way of really just controlling people with, oh, you have a disagreement, that's case on post. Oh, you don't want to
Right.
do this particular job, that's case on post. Oh, you
Totally.
don't like that I just slammed the door on you, that's case on post. Forget about your case on post. Oh, I hate my accent, Scottish. Oh, I would love it. I would
Oh, I
love it.
love the Scottish
I
accent.
love a Scottish. Of course, I always think about Austin Powers, though.
That's
Wasn't
not
the guy
Scottish.
that's not
But
Scottish?
oh,
No.
no,
Yeah.
Austin Powers is British, but he did play a Scottish character on SNL.
Yes.
Is like, if it isn't Scottish, it's
It's
crap.
crap. Yes.
Do
That
you
was in
mean
the
he does
movie.
play a Scottish
Fat
character in Austin
bastard.
Powers?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
Fat
Okay. Okay.
bastard.
Okay. Yes.
Fat
Yes.
bastard. My Tony says that all the time, which it's embarrassing. Like we met these people at a soccer game. We were at this kid's soccer game and they are Scottish, although I've done this too, so I shouldn't even joke about it. And really, and strong accents. And he always throws out that if it's not Scottish, it's crap. But I mean, I did it the other day on live. But I am Scottish, so I feel like I can say that.
Nice.
Scottish men have what? Have a weird seat. Maybe because I don't know, kilts?
Yeah. I don't know about
Yeah.
that.
Well, I think we're pretty good through a lot of the comments. I'm going to have to catch up on a lot of them afterwards. I know that you have a tree to trim.
Cut down, not trim.
Cut
It's
down,
coming
cut
down.
down, cut down. You're going to use
Yeah.
big tools. Mhm. All right. Well, I forgot that I'm the one doing the live. Sorry.
You sure are.
I'm running the show, so I get to wrap it up. Thank
Before
you
you
so
wrap
much
it up,
for
make
being
sure to
here.
hide that comment because then it'll stay up the whole time.
Oh,
There you go.
see, good to know. Learning something all the time.
Let's see if it works.
Yes. Oh yeah, you got to do that. Oh. Be sure, if you have not already, subscribe to my channel. I would love it. My Tony said he would come on and share what it's like dating an ex-Scientologist and ex-Sea Org member for 10 years. But he said he's not showing up for less than 10,000 subscribers.
I love it.
He's such a diva, but I love him to death. So thank you, everybody. Aaron, anything else?
That's it. Thanks for hanging out with us this evening, guys, or
All right.
afternoon.
Talk to you later.